Welcome back for yet another episode of The Voice of Generation Climate, The Voice of Gen Z, an episode by Climbs with Manas Rath. Manas Rath is the founder of Leap Cities, a wonderful organization based out of Bombay that Climbs chose to partner with recently for a carbon neutral event. Manas, it's so lovely to have you here today.
Likewise.
Looking forward to hearing your story. We also have with us Dhruvi Narsaria, who is on the Climbs team on growth, sales, and marketing. Super excited to have you also here, Dhruvi, today. And Dhruvi, amazingly enough, did the carbon neutral event with Leap Cities recently. So we're going to go through both stories in the next half an hour. Manas, can we start by learning a little bit about what Leap Cities is? What is your ambition? What's your goal? What vision have you set toward building a more sustainable future?
Great. Yes, Ani. So really the goal of Leap Cities, we want to do three things. The first is, can we support businesses and NGOs who are trying to solve urban problems, both on the side of sustainability, making our cities more sustainable, but also livability, making our cities more livable so people have a higher quality of life living in Indian towns and cities. Can we support them with long-term strategic and management support so they can scale up, they can become more effective, and they can improve the quality of lives of urban Indians? The second is, can we help towns and cities to become more sustainable and livable? And this could be working with collectives, it could be working with government. And the third really is looking at macro issues around the quality of our democracy, the quality of our capitalism, and the understanding of citizenship or being part of society, as it can be aligned with like-minded people to address these, which I think are really the core of all the big challenges that we are seeing today in society and environment, come at some level down to these three factors. And that's really what we're trying to see over the next 20, 30, 40 years, who can we partner with and what can we achieve on these fronts. The goal really is to improve the quality of life of all the 560 million urban Indians today, which will be about 750 million in the next 10 years. That's our big picture, that's our big goal.
That's amazing. A more livable city is, I think, something we can all do with. A more sustainable city is something we can all do with. I'm looking out of my window right now. I'm in Delhi, and it's bad. For all the love that we have for the cities we're from, there are clear physically visible problems that all of us can, see, feel, and even suffer from. And we have the next couple of years only to solve this problem, right? So very fortunate to have organizations like Leap Cities taking on the mantle of being a Gen Z organization, fighting the good fight. Thank you for the work you do. Dhruvi, would love to dive right into the event that you did on behalf of clients for a carbon neutral event with Leap. Let's actually start with that and then unpack more initiatives that Leap is also taking on.
Yeah, thanks, Annie. So Manas, actually going a little bit back to what you said, a lot of your work revolves around bringing together a lot of different people, a lot of different partners and organizations together. So what's the best way to do that? Is it events? Are events back? A little bit about how that has been for you as an organization.
Look, I think events are definitely back. What we're trying to do is bring people together through workshops. I believe in the idea of collective action. And so the two principles are collective action and peer learning, right? No matter how much we know, if we want to support the management teams or the senior teams at social enterprises, what they can learn from each other is always going to be much greater than what any Leap Cities team can provide, right? So we do workshops. The second thing is, people always say in the social sector that people don't collaborate enough. And I think the one barrier to collaboration is that they don't know each other well enough. They don't have that trust and that understanding. And we all are busy in our day-to-day lives. So the idea is, can we create cohorts of organizations and can we bring them together often enough over a long enough period of time to develop that trust and relationships, and through that collaboration happens, learning happens, and then each organization becomes stronger. So that's really what we're trying to drive towards.
Right. And so for everyone listening, we did an event with Leap in November 4th. And, they actually decided to not just neutralize the entire carbon emissions of their event, but go carbon positive. So neutralize 4x worth of what the event would have generated in terms of carbon dioxide and just general, pollution. So what kind of motivated you to do that, Manas? Like, what was your underlying decision-making factor in choosing us and choosing to partner with us and neutralizing your event?
Well, I think to in terms of choosing you and partnering with you, I think there were two ideas. One is it looked like a good thing to do. And secondly, it was small enough. We said, let's try it, right? Let's get a sense of what does this really mean. And I've seen the demo before at a personal capacity. I've done the demo. I've allotted my clients earlier. So I said, let's see what the event looks like, right? Because hopefully we'll be doing a lot of workshops and a lot of events, and therefore we start with something small and it builds from there. Now, this was a very small event. It was 40 people. They were all from Mumbai. So even when Ani looked at it, he said, look, the carbon footprint is really small. It kind of was like, do you even want to bother? And to me, it was, look, let's get started, right? Let's try it. And given the budgets that we had for this event, we said, why not go positive? Because at the end of the day, even my personal footprint, I know my personal footprint is obviously a lot larger for that one day than my footprint of attending this workshop, right? So if you have 40 people in the room, the personal footprint is of course, much larger. Since we had the budget, we said, look, let's go climate positive, right? Why not? Let's try it. I think the other reason for doing this was that, look, at the end of the day, we want to change our behavior. We all want to become more responsible, more thoughtful in our day-to-day decisions, and we want to influence others to do the same. And I thought, if you've got 40 people in the room who are all leaders of NGOs who are at some level concerned about some kind of social or environmental issue. Now, they're not all environmentalists. They're all probably would not. They may or may not recognize themselves as Gen Z. But look, we have all learned from others. We have seen others, and we've been influenced ourselves, right? And therefore, if we can do something which influences others, makes them think, and that's why we made it a proper session where we gave you time to present it. We blocked out 20 minutes for people to go online. It's not like a quick scan it at the door and kind of do it on your own time, right? We gave people 20 minutes, 30 minutes to do it, so that the idea is that hopefully, they as organization leaders will choose to do something like this on their own, and we'll reinforce the message in our future workshops, and that hopefully changes their behavior at some level on a day-to-day basis. So that is the idea.
No, it's so interesting that you mentioned collective learning as one of like the cornerstones of what you do at Leap, because I saw this firsthand at the event itself, right? Like there were a whole sort of host of people who saw each other and were then thus motivated to do it on the spot together. Because we said that, hey guys, like we're doing a session, you have 10 minutes, scan the QR code, decide where your clients should go, decide the project which you want to support. And I think doing it together brought like a sense of unity and brought a sense of motivation to the entire activity and project. How do you see that translate to like climate work at large, right? Like this, of course, was a small example of one event we did together. But just brainstorming on ideas about how do you take collective action as an idea, as like an overall blanket statement, and then bring it to work that we're all doing in climate and within social impact?
Wow, that's a big and tough question. Look, one thing is, firstly, we have to recognize that everyone is on a certain journey in life as organizations and as individuals. I think the more we try to create barriers saying you are this, I am that, we are this, they are that, I think we lose momentum and we lose opportunities to influence each other and to also learn from each other. I think too many people today think that I'm here to teach, I've achieved a certain level of understanding, self-actualization, whatever. I'm going to teach the world how to become as good as me, right? I think that's one attitude that we need to break down, because we all are culprits at some level or the other, in something or the other. We all are part of the problem, and we all have to try to be part of the solution. I think a lot of things, we don't talk about climate change or just sustainability. The reason we talk about making city livable and sustainable is because I think environment is a part of quality of life and vice versa. Right? We can't separate out environmental activism and say become more responsible towards the environment, but not responsible in your other relationships and other things that you do, right? Towards your family, towards your neighbors, towards in your work environment, right? And we have a lot of challenges and a lot of stresses in all these domains, right? So it's not life is getting more complicated. It is getting more difficult in many ways, and therefore I think we all have to think about what are we really striving for as individuals and as organizations beyond our climate agenda and sustainability agenda, and how do we really become a more positive contributor to everything and everyone around us. And I think having more people getting together, talking, learning is one way to do it. That's why we want physical interaction, because on Zoom very little penetrates and sticks, right? But it's a tough call. It's a tough task, and therefore one thing we do is we say, look, we co-create programs. Right? We don't say we will run an accelerator, we will run a program. So it's really co-creating solutions, getting people together, requesting, literally begging them for their time and their space of mind. We may feel we are doing something for you, but they feel like we are giving up our time to come and, what are you doing for us, right? I think, and getting the right group together is very important. I think people who want to learn, people who want to change, not just people who want to teach others how to change, but who understand that they are also part of that journey of improving themselves. I think that's very important. And I think getting a good group of people together is sometimes the biggest challenge. And if you get that right, a lot of the work down the road becomes easier. That's what we strive to do better and better each time.
And I think the group angle is super important. If it's just individuals being told what to do, nobody really likes being told what to do.
Yeah.
But going to individuals and then convincing them that they may want to do something and making them want to do it is far more powerful, right? And if groups actually start, snowballing from there, wanting to create action at a micro level, right? You used a very interesting line earlier. It was small enough to do. That's actually very much in client philosophy also. It's small enough to do, big enough to matter.
Yes. Yeah.
Very, very, very powerful. You can start with a very small action and then it actually snowballs to become a very large action.
Yeah. Actually, Ani, I like the way you guys have always put that. Like, since the beginning, ever since I got to know about your organization, you sort of put that, right? Small enough to do, big enough to matter. And very often I find that my natural tendency is to try and do the bigger things, right? And therefore you lose opportunity where small things can snowball. Or today, maybe we did something, but we don't know who in that room might want to pick up on this and do something much bigger.
Exactly.
On the road, right? And therefore, I think that's something conscious that we are trying to learn, is to focus on the small things as much as we focus on the big things.
So the big things stack up. They stack up from very, very, very small things, right? And if you just make climate action so large to do that it's intimidating, people will run away and say it's somebody else's job to do it, right? But we break it up into very many different bite-sized pieces.
Yeah.
We break it up into very many different solutions, make it easily accessible, economically viable, fun to do. Of course, people will want to do it. I think all of us over here believe in the better angels of our nature, right?
Yes.
Where we are, we do want to preserve planet Earth while being able to live fulfilling lives. But our solutions packaged in a way where we really want to do it. And if individuals start doing it, of course, groups will.
Yeah.
I think that's super fascinating for me that Leap City has taken the whole city lens to come at action, right? And taking the city lens, going down to the microcosm of smaller groups and then individuals, and then driving real change on the ground. Within those groups, you come across so many different types of stakeholders now. You have policymakers. Yeah. You have people who are representing not-for-profit organizations, people who are representing enterprises. Across all these stakeholders, if you had to forcibly put a hierarchy that you believe is most responsible for and will actually be the one taking action the most toward driving climate action, who do you think it would be? Is it individuals? Is it enterprises, consumer brands, not-for-profit organizations, policymakers? Who should lead the charge?
I mean, look, in theory, the charge should either be led by individuals, because ultimately that's what society is. Even a democracy really is about, individuals have to be responsible for democracy, right? Or you could say that it should be the government officials who take charge because that's their job, that's their responsibility, they have the resources, the mandate, whatever. The reality is that both these groups are also very distracted by other priorities and other challenges, right? We designed the Leap Mumbai program, the launch event that we did with clients, around the idea that NGOs, for better or worse, and with all their limitations and issues, NGOs are probably the only group of organizations whose primary concern is to improve the quality of lives of other people, right? So we designed the program around NGOs operating in Mumbai, reaching out to a lot of people, no matter what they do, and saying, what's your role in improving quality of life in this city, and can we help to multiply that role so we have greater outcomes and quicker outcomes, right? So I think it is organizations who choose to influence others through their resources and actions and words that can have a huge impact. We have seen that in media and advertising, right? I mean, journalists can write as much as they want, but a bunch of brands come on board and choose to promote a certain social issue in a thoughtful way. You actually have a huge amount of impact and recall. So I think businesses, NGOs, but businesses have their own priorities also. But I think businesses and NGOs are in positions to have huge impact much more so than individual citizens, or in my view, even government can, in a true sense, in a long-term sustainable sense.
And globally or within India, are there any examples or models that you've been particularly inspired by that you think have done a very good job? You know, using the capsule of groups to drive impact in society. That you're emulating or you're just overall inspired by, and you find them also to be Gen Z organizations. Because like I'm thinking through, one that I think you may find particularly interesting, the donut economics model in Amsterdam. I was experimented. It's very much around designing sustainable cities, right, to make them more livable and more sustainable.
So in that sense, of course, we have learned. I've personally learned a lot over the last many years. You've got tremendous activities, all the way from China looking at sponge cities to the Middle Eastern countries looking at water conserve, water scarce agriculture in very, very thoughtful ways. A lot of American and European, even American, I would say, but a lot of European cities especially are very thoughtful about quality of life and governance and managing cities in a way to improve quality of life. And there's a lot we can learn from them. So I think there are organized, and then there are the tremendous organizations that work on on leadership development for organizations. Leaders Quest is one organization as I've been involved in a little bit, and they look at how do they broaden the horizons of corporate leaders to think differently about not just their business but about bigger issues in society, of which environment is one of them, but social equity and all are there. And that's again through peer learning, through experiential models. They do a wonderful job of just opening eyes of people and then letting them decide what they do with that. It's like once your consciousness expands, what you do with that expanded consciousness could be many different things, right? Where some level our job is to just expand that consciousness and awareness, and then people may take it forward. Some may not take it forward at all. And then some may take it forward in ways that we cannot predict, right? With their organization, with their communities, within their families, with their philanthropy, etc. So I think that definitely, there are probably way too many organizations for me to name here. But in India, for example, the Center for Science and Environment, CSC, is a very well-known NGO. The only magazine I subscribe to in physical copy still is Down to Earth, which is their publication. I think it's really useful.
Excellent. And they make a great video documentary series as well with Scroll India.
Yes.
Called Eco India on YouTube. It's phenomenal.
Yeah. So I think there are a lot of models that have come together. Whether you look at the Leap Cities design or the way we want to do things long term, I think there are wonderful things going on. I think there's tremendous amount of activity going on that 8 billion people out there are doing. And I think there's a lot that we can learn, and it's always challenging. The challenge is in how do you adapt what you see other people doing to local conditions. And I think that's a real challenge, because to understand all the factors that make something successful is not always easy. And you have to understand that, do we have the building blocks? Do we have the raw material? Do we have the conditions where somebody else's model, how does it apply to our conditions? We've also been doing a bit of that. That's why we are in an experimentation mode right now of trying different things and kind of seeing what sticks and what works. And that's also why we do the co-creation model. We tell people, say, look, next 6 months, don't expect much from us. We are begging you for your time to co-create something, which then we hope will work for everybody and serve everyone's need, right? So I think that approach and humility is, I think, also very important.
Yeah, I actually was curious to know, obviously, since you speak to a lot of these organizations day in, day out, from policymakers to like government as well as social impact organizations, what are like the key challenges do you think that they are facing on ground when it comes to climate, right? Like putting on the climate lens for them, and what are like maybe some of the accelerators or positive changes that you've seen?
Well, that's a huge question. That's a huge question, and there's so many different answers depending on who you talk to and where you talk to them, right? I think one of the issues around climate is, okay, so macro issue, I think a big problem with the climate work is around communication. And going back to what you said earlier, we've positioned it as this, we have 2 years, you've got 10 years to do something, or it's going to be a disaster. Yeah, look, timelines come and go, right? And humanity survives. I think we only seem to be expanding. The number of people are only going up and up. Yes, problems are increasing, right? Climate disasters are happening. But when you look at it short term, you see people are going, number of people are going up, economy is growing. And yes, problems are also growing, right? I think this doomsday approach, I think, turns people off. It makes them feel we don't know, we don't know what to do about it. Now, everyone is trying to optimize within their job, right? If I'm a government officer, I've got certain budgets, certain rules, procurement norms, and I've got certain expertise, and I've got certain pressures from top and from below to do certain things. And many of these pressures, like the corporate manager, is constrained by quarterly results. If you're a publicly limited, a corporate, governments are also very constrained by their transfer cycles, by election cycles, by who's on their team, what expertise is available, and there's a huge amount of vested interest, right? You've got companies out there that want to sell cement and want to sell a certain kind of infrastructure and so on. It's very hard then to influence a government official to say, why don't you, focus on green infrastructure, right, or blue and green infrastructure. So I think the problem is there is no overall strong narrative on what improves quality of life. Therefore, we have optimized for GDP, and optimizing for GDP is often bad for every other aspect of life, right? Including the environment, including health, even certainly well-being, mental health, etc. And I think until we don't have better metrics, and I say there are three bad metrics that have messed up the world. One is GDP, because it doesn't measure well-being or true progress the way we should think about humanity. Second is calories, because it's got nothing to do with nutrition or health. And third is 1.5 degrees C, because if your Earth gets 10 degrees hotter in the summer and 10 degrees cooler in the winter, your average is going to be zero. You'll have moved zero, right? And therefore, the 1.5 degrees C means nothing to me. I mean, Indian cities today are 4 to 8 degrees hotter than they were 25, 30 years ago. And therefore, we need better communication. Maybe that's one big macro issue. Second is, like you're saying, we need to break it down into small things that people can actually do. Problem is that those small things that tend to conflict with established rules, norms, or other small things that somebody else is doing. And then you say, look, we don't have time or energy to solve this issue. Let's just do it the way we have always been doing it, right? I think that inertia tends to be a big problem.
It's interesting when you say the entire small thing, because I think when a lot of us think back to the first time we were introduced to taking care of our environment or actually having individual action associated, at least my mind goes back to an example of, say, learning how to compost in school or in housing societies all over Mumbai, right? I just feel what you're highlighting seems to be also what is that simple enough action that we can do together that still makes us feel we can have a positive hand to play, and there is something that's unit positive good that comes out of it. Hopefully I think Climbs is sort of enabling that to some extent when it comes to consumer behavior events, but lots more to do. I think a lot of problems yet to be solved.
Yeah.
And overall metrics that we choose to go after as well, right? You said GDP is a bad overall metric to have for society because it comes at the expense of everything else. But that's because GDP has also been framed in the wrong way, right? If we framed it more correctly now, maybe it could be a great metric. One of our fantastic partners, Fireside Ventures, has this acronym PPP, but used for People, Planet, Profit. And that is the model of business. That is the future of business. Imagine if every business oriented themselves around taking care of people, taking care of the planet, and then was profitable. You would build sustainable businesses for the future that were actually in harmony with nature, right? And then if the sum of all of that leads to more GDP creation, that is humanity moved forward, with the planet also moved forward, right? And I think that reframing some of those models by bringing up these actionable solutions that can be embedded into enterprises, into brands, and just make them more adoptable. A large part of the reason why they don't adopt them is because it feels like there's a tussle. It's a zero-sum game. If I do this, I can't do something else.
Yeah.
Right?
No, absolutely. And, so I think one of the things about metrics that become powerful is that they also tend to be very simple. In a sense, they also tend to then become unidirectional because they're simple. So why does GDP work? Because it's a very simple metric. And the moment you say, how do I measure planet and people, it becomes a very complex metric, right? And then you'll have all kinds of gaming and all kinds of resistance, right? But it's just because it's more complex doesn't mean it's not the right way. It's definitely the better way the right way to move forward.
The coming back to Bhutan's actually attempted this also, by the way.
What?
Bhutan as a nation has attempted this. They do gross national happiness, right?
Happiness.
GNH.
Yeah.
It's a hard metric to come to like a number with, but they have some 35 different input variables that feed it.
That's right.
And I think it's fascinating because I haven't been, but like my sister just went recently and she was telling me that it is actually super clean as a nation, number one. Number two, everybody seems content,
Yeah.
right? And like you feel that aura when you walk around that there is a certain level of quality of life, which is what you were talking about earlier, right? Quality of life.
Yeah. Now, what's interesting is that there are other rankings, international rankings of happiness, right? Where actually Bhutan ranks very low. And the reason is that those assume that income level, quality of housing, quality of transportation, quality of infrastructure, etc., are the drivers of happiness. Now, when you take all those factors, actually Bhutan ends up, ranking very low, right? If you say income, the number of doctors per 1 million people. And I say, look, instead of wanting more doctors per million people, if people don't fall sick in the first place, they don't need as many doctors, right? Now, your GDP approach will kind of say you need so many doctors, so many hospital beds, etc. Bhutan doesn't need that because they don't have as much illness, right, as other countries. So, no, absolutely. I mean, I think that well-being and happiness become complex to measure, but they are ultimately what matter. It's the same thing for the environment. We need to have more thoughtful metrics. I understand the value of 1.2, 2 degrees, 3 degrees, whatever, but I think that short change is the real challenge, and it defocuses from the whole set of things that need to be done. Because then we also clean energy is the way. Okay, and I understand that clean energy is important, but clean energy itself is not going to improve quality of life, right? And therefore we look at quality of life and so on and see where does sustainability fit into that. That's the way we are looking at it. And just coming back to a point you made about groups, right? I think groups are very important. And as we urbanize and as we become so the trend I've seen is that as we become more middle income and higher income, people actually tend to retreat into their own private spaces. 30 years ago in India, if you didn't have sugar in the house, you woke up at 7:30, there's no sugar, you ring the doorbell at the neighbor, right? Today you'll blink it. Yeah. And what does that mean? I can buy the sugar. I don't need to borrow. I don't need to use hand-me-downs. I don't need others. I'm trying to become self-sufficient, and that self-sufficiency, while it's a laudable goal in some ways, also isolates us from collaborating with others. So in fact, I find that as cities become more middle income and higher income, you'll find greater level of apathy towards the public domain, and we need to find ways to reverse that. So everyone's saying my private car, my house, my community, my club, and that's where my life sort of begins and ends. What happens in the street, I can't do anything about, right? We need to bring back that sense of collective action, of everyone becoming responsible for their towns and cities again, because socially it is dangerous, environmentally and governance-wise also it becomes very tenuous than to have public action at a community level to solve our common problems.
It's a very interesting insight that with rising incomes, we retreat into our own spaces. It actually collaborates another insight that I heard recently, which is in India, we choose to, go home to recharge our energy. Mm-hmm. So going home is like a retreat into getting away from public spaces that are overwhelming, right?
Yeah.
Public spaces are overwhelming. I need to get home to be able to recharge, which is why people try and have very large homes. Bigger and bigger and bigger homes, and then everything moves into your home. With rising incomes, your gym, all your luxuries and conveniences move into your house.
Absolutely.
And then you barely ever want to really leave that to go outside to recharge. But there's some nations where you go outside to recharge,
yes,
right? And you go home just to basically to meet your bare necessities of sleeping.
Yeah.
Right? Then you get out again to go and recharge. So you choose to have small homes.
Yeah.
So this whole analogy of rising incomes, the choice to have small homes, large homes, it also comes from energy. Like what environment is actually feeding your energy? And
yes,
I think that comes full circle with what you are doing as an organization as Leap Cities, right? You're trying to create more livable environments, more livable and more sustainable cities, so that people actually start wanting to go back out, getting recharged, wanting to take care of it. And if that happens, we change the entire DNA and fabric of people, how they relate to each other and their neighbors.
Absolutely. One of the things, I remember a turning point in some of my thought processes. There's a book called Happy Cities by a guy called, I think it's Charles Montgomery is the author. He's Canadian. it's a very Western city oriented book, right? But I read that about 3, 4 years, 5 years ago maybe. It was phenomenal because that really ticked point. I'd been working on these social issues, and you think about basic needs, like people who don't have water and people who don't have this. And he focused, a lot of that book was focused around public spaces. This is something we don't even think about in India, right? Because we think it's a luxury, let's get people housed and clothed and fed first, right? But just the idea of public spaces and what it can do for a quality of life, and that goes back to what you just said, which is people want to go out to public spaces, but here you've got noise pollution and air pollution and traffic and so on. You don't want to step out. You want to bring the public space also. You want to bring into the private environment with your large gated communities and so on, right? You want to avoid the public space as much as you can, which is really sad because so many of our cities actually have so much to offer, whether it are the parks, beaches, sea coast, hills, and so on, and we don't use it because we're completely messed up our urban planning, and we don't pay enough attention to the effects of pollution, especially noise and air pollution, which subconsciously turn us off from the public domain, even if you don't recognize it as a problem.
But then Manas, to that point, what is your take on like competing priorities, right? Like, so for example, one might argue that let's take the case of Mumbai right now, which is like it's more livable because there's a lot of construction for public transport, which will eventually increase quality of life to some extent because people can get to point A to point B faster. But then at the same time, of course, it's come at a cost of air pollution during winter, which has been like unseen in the last few years, other like noise pollution, etc. So how, I mean, I just wonder, as we're developing as a nation and as cities, how do we then balance all of these competing priorities? And I guess communication and conversation is a good starting point there.
Well, I think communication and conversation is the starting point, but we also need, rigorous assessment of what the options are, right? Now, I wouldn't say that they are perfectly. See, if you say, look, for 5 years we're going to have air pollution problems because we're doing this, and then it'll help. I think people will live through it, right? Eventually, the air pollution will disperse, and that's okay. The thing is, I say that Indian cities are not unmanageable. They seem to be unmanaged. Who is in charge? Where is the design? What is the plan? Because there doesn't seem to be a clear roadmap. Say, when we do this, this, and this, please put up with this suffering for the next 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. We will get to this point where things will be much better, right? It just seems to be an endless cycle of reasonably poorly thought through ideas and infrastructure. Now, I'll give you an example. See, today, Bombay used to be very famous for its train system, since we're talking about transport, train system and the bus system, right? Now, today, Bombay's population is, 6, 8, 10 times what it was 40 years ago or 30 years ago. Okay. Bombay runs 3,000, the fleet of BEST buses in Mumbai is at about 3,600. How many are on the road? I do not know. Now, Singapore runs 4,500 buses. New York runs 5,000 or 6,000 buses. Okay. These are cities with much smaller populations, equivalent or smaller land mass, and a much lower population of people who don't have high incomes. Okay. Now, before you decide you need, metro fine, it's good. But before you decide you need metros and a huge road and all those things, why not have 10,000 buses running the streets of Bombay, all air conditioned, hopefully all electric, much cleaner, good quality, so that people like us who can afford a car choose. So there's a saying, right? It says, a rich country is not one where the poor have private vehicles. A developed country is one where even the rich choose to use public transportation. Now, I don't see any effort in Mumbai over the last 20, 30 years, which is oriented towards getting people who can own a motorbike or a car to prefer public vehicles. Not one action has happened, right? So then you can't say that please suffer for 5 years and then we'll have a better situation, because, and I call that lazy governance, right? You don't do the job that you're supposed to do, and then you expect people to just adapt and adjust. Like in Delhi, when you do odd even, I say I'm for odd even, no problem. But then first get other things. Like if Singapore does an odd even, it's understandable, right? They'll give you great transportation, great alternatives. Then they say, now sorry, you can't do this, right? But when you don't provide the alternative and you just say odd even, people are going to cheat the system. And that's exactly what happens when it falls apart, right? So I think there is a role to better planning, more systemic work that our cities require. Maybe they don't have the right people, in which case I say, where's the effort to getting the right people in? Are we training people the right way? Are we empowering municipalities to take those actions? And that is also not happening, right? So then you're creating problems, with no clear roadmap of how those problems will at some point, stop becoming a problem. I feel it's just a cascading series of problems.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. Like, I think transparency and accountability, right? Like I think they're big cornerstones for any collective action and change, which is lacking. Like, we don't know, like you said, is it a 5-year plan? Is it a 10-year plan? For till when are we supposed to put up with something? And I think even when it comes to positive action, I would say on the other way around, like when we say don't use plastic, for instance, right? Or carpool. I think a lot of people are still unaware about what happens then. Like, by doing this, what is the benefit? What have I really saved in terms of, like, say CO2 effects, or what is the net benefit that I'm driving? And I think all of us here need to probably do a better job of communicating that.
No, definitely, and I think everyone can take a lesson from your insight, which is you gotta make responsible actions easier. If the barrier to taking responsible action is too high, people will not do it, right? And then you got to make it comprehensive also. I mean, as a government, for example, if you say don't use plastic bags, but then I'm going to a market, I'm buying 20 things from a shop, of which 18 items are already packaged in plastic, which is actually an MLP with printing and all that stuff, right? Then if I don't use one plastic bag, I'm not seeing the benefit. So unless you have a holistic sort of approach towards packaging and other materials, this becomes like a very visible, but it's a drop in the ocean. It doesn't solve the problem. And then people at some point will say, why do I put up with the inconvenience if it's not really solving the problem, right? So yeah, it's not an easy thing for sure. But we have to find ways to make things easier, which is also what I like about Climb, which is make the interface easy, make it simple to do, build a habit around it, hopefully, and then it builds its own momentum.
That's why we exist, and we've reached 100,000 people so far, but a long way to go. 100 million out there that we think our Gen Z would happily, take the small enough to do big enough to matter action. It's great to have Leap organization,
once again, I don't think there are 100 million people who are Gen Z. I think everybody, if it is easy enough and if it is explained, I think everybody wants to be a better human being. I've not met anybody who said, I don't care about the environment, I want to destroy it, right? Yeah. It's about the communication. It's about making it simple enough at that point of transaction.
Yeah, economical.
And you should have the 3 billion consumers or 2 billion who are really consumers out there, right? They should be the target for something like this, because we all are contributing to that problem, right? Yeah. Everyone is contributing to it.
For sure. And not just individuals, even organizations.
Yes.
Organizations like Leap that are then Gen Z, organizations saying it's our job to also build sustainably. Whatever our agenda, do it sustainably with people, planet, and profit, in that order. So what is the one big goal that Leap Cities has for the next year that, you're looking to achieve, and how can clients help with that?
Over the next 1 year, we've got 2 programs going right now, and really our focus is on getting the model right with the right partners, the right participants. One is for businesses who are involved, who provide sustainable city solutions, and then with NGOs in Mumbai doing the Leap Mumbai program. I think where we could partner is over time, and it may not be the next 1 year. We want to do a lot more citizen outreach around issues of sustainability, responsibility, being a better citizen, right? Make your society around you better. You enjoy your society more. You become a better person. Other people get to enjoy things more. So I think as we do more such, citizen-oriented communication through our partners, of course, through the NGOs and the businesses we work with, I think, hopefully there'll be a lot more opportunity to spread the idea of clients and spread the idea of doing the right thing, protecting the environment in the first place, and then reducing the negative effects of what we do. I think there's a significant space for simplifying the way we live. I think there are various models for sustainability. I think simplifying the way we live, simplifying what we consume, how much we consume, I think is going to become an important part. Without that, I don't know how sustainable development is really going to work. So looking at how do we live it ourselves, and how do we help others to understand that, I think is another big priority, but probably not for the next year. That will be a longer term goal that we have.
I think the one big takeaway from this conversation for me is improving overall standards of living by making people respect public spaces a lot more, and making them actually want to go and preserve and spend time in public spaces, right? The second that starts happening, it has ripple effects all through an individual behavior.
Absolutely. Now, just one technical nitpick over there. When people think about standard of living, usually it is linked to income and consumption and affordability and stuff. We focus on quality of life, where a big part of our quality of life actually comes from completely non-economic, non-consumption based factors, right? But public spaces can enhance that, where you don't need to sit in a coffee shop and spend 300 rupees a head. You can be sitting on the steps in a public space and the environment was clean and quiet and green and beautiful. You would save money over there, which might be bad for the economy. It would be good for your life and good for your health, right?
No, totally great correction. Quality of life over standard of living. I think that trumps standard of living for sure.
Yeah.
Right. Well, Manas, thank you so much for being with us for this episode of The Voice of Gen Z today. It's been a real pleasure having you. Looking forward to working with you on Leap Cities more deeply in the future.
Absolutely. Likewise, and full power to you guys, and good luck. It was nice to work on the first event and look forward to doing a lot more with you.
Thanks a lot. And thanks, Dhruvi, for also being with us today, repping Climbs.